Paul with Rocket Man Plumbing, and it is the beginning of swamp cooler season. It's gonna get warm, and I just want to point out a couple things on a cooler that we just replaced and why we replaced them. This here is the squirrel cage of a cooler that was rusted out. This is inside this barrel is what turns the air and forces air into your house. As you can see, the squirrel cage is completely rusted out. Therefore, it's throwing a bunch of air not into your house. And it's a rusted out piece of junk. We just replaced this one. I also wanted to show you one thing. This is one of the pads that was on that cooler. Water from your pump goes into this trough, and then there's a bunch of slots all the way along here. And what happens is those slots will get full of calcium, or they get plugged up. And if you have 2 or 3 in a row that are plugged up, that's a section of your pad that does not get wet. One thing that's very important whenever you're servicing one is to make sure all these little slots are open. If they're open, they're getting water as long as the pump is working. That's what I wanted to show you here, and we're going to go through this afternoon and look and go through the steps of servicing the swamp cooler. Step 1 is take the covers off and fold them up. All panels, and you spread them out on the roof where you know which panel goes on which side. Now, this cooler on this side, we replaced at the end of last season. So it is basically a brand new cooler. All we should have to do to it is vacuum it out, oil the bearings, and even the pads are almost brand new, so we're not even going to be changing the pads on that one. On this cooler over here, it's almost on its last legs. It's starting to get very rusty. We're going to assess the condition of the pulleys and the bearings, see how the rust is going through, whether or not, and make a decision whether or not we think it's going to make it all year this year. Next step that's very important is you always oil the bearings, which there's one on each side. There's one behind the pulley. There's little caps that you can lift up. Make sure it takes oil. All bearings have a place to put oil in. Another thing you always check is the tension on the belt. You want about a 3/4 inch play. If it's too tight, it puts too much strain on the motor and on the bearings, and it causes either or both to go out sooner. That's adjusted just about right. Once you've cleaned the pan, the next step is to hook up the water and get water flowing into the cooler or coolers while it's filling up. That's when you take off the old pads and put on the new Aspen pads on each cooler. Whenever you have a swamp cooler that runs on Aspen pads, you've always got a pump, but the most important thing to keep it working all year long is to make sure there's pump stream over the pump. And the purpose of this is so the little pieces of the Aspen does not get sucked up into the pump and plug up the spider tubing up above. Now, another important thing that what you want when the pump is pumping, water dumps into this trough and it wets the pad, air gets sucked in the pad, that's what cools your house. The important thing to check is to make sure all of these holes are clear. Lots of times they'll get plugged up with calcium or other debris, and then you'll have a section of the pad that's not getting wet. Very important to make sure that's clear, and according to these ones are very clear. There's no problem with them at all. These coolers, when you buy them new, unfortunately they come with the cheapest floats made. So lots of times we put on a better float right off the bat. But we'll wait and see. We'll see if they work once we get water in them. And if in doubt, you replace the float, because stuck floats is the biggest cause of callbacks. Float sticks, it overfills, and then water comes out, starts running off your roof. That's bad. Another thing you check, this is the overflow tube. When this is screwed into the bottom, you want the water set about a ½ inch from the top of this tube. And if it gets too full, water goes over the tube and then runs down out on your roof. So that's what we don't want.
Alrighty, so now we're going to be connecting the water supply line up to the swamp coolers. So here you have a 1/4-inch shut off here. As you can see, it's been leaking right here, so this might have to be replaced pretty soon. You want to be very careful that the line's not busted from here to the attic, because sometimes the line busts in there and you just flood out the whole house. Ceilings will come down and, you know, cause a lot of water damage and stuff like that. Once you're sure that the nut is tight on there, we're going to go ahead and turn on the little water shut. You should be able to hear the water flowing through the little 1/4-inch copper line. And what you want to do is you want to dry this nut here with something. Make sure that you get all the water out of the way. This way, next time when you come to double check it, you are sure that there's no leaks. If you see some water, then you know there's a leak. You either gotta tighten up the nut, or sometimes you gotta snug up this little packing here that's on the little 1/4-inch water shut off. And then also you want to take a look up in the line and make sure that there's no water spraying out of anywhere. And now we'll go up on the rooftop and make sure that there's no leaks.
Now this is the old cooler that we're questioning its condition. And I plug in the motor and start turning it. And because it's broken loose, it's pulled up. Whenever it's running, the suction pulls it up to the edge of the squirrel cage, and that's what's making that terrible, awful, god-awful noise. The bottom line is we are going to be replacing this cooler probably in a week or so. That's the story. I thought maybe it could last one more year, but nope. We're going to be replacing this cooler. Inside here is a damper. Very important to have this damper in when you winterize the cooler, because if you don't have it in, you heat the great outdoors all winter long. Now, when you're actually firing up the cooler, what you want to do is you want to leave this in, and then we plug in the motor. Go ahead and plug the motor in. And you leave the damper in, you turn on the motor, get it spinning. And with this in, that causes, if there's any dust, it blows out instead of blowing inside the house. You just want to do that just for a little bit. It's blowing out this way, and this is a brand new cooler, so it's not that dirty anyway. And then you pull this out. Voila, we have water. Now, let's go ahead and put the covers on those three sides. Now, the important thing, this is the overflow tube, and the water is almost high enough, but not quite. But you want to adjust, you want this float to turn off the water when it is right at a 1/2 inch from the overflow tube. We got a little bit more to go. And these kind of floats, you can adjust the level of the float just by carefully bending this brass rod. And you can adjust the level of the float a little bit. And the other thing you want to check is you want to lift up on this to make sure the water stops completely from coming out. When they start going bad, they almost shut off, but not quite. So that's going to trickle in. By the time that stops, that'll be just about right. Okay, this is Kyle with Rocket Man Plumbing. We're going to do a very fast review of every step necessary to service and get your swamp cooler up and running. First step, if it has a cover, you take the cover off, fold it up, take it down. The next step is you take off all these pads, you take them off, you get a shop vac or a little broom and dustpan, and you clean out the pan. Very good. The next step is you get your water supply tubing and you run it to wherever you're hooking up to. Most of the time it's either at a hot water heater or an outside hose bib. You get water flowing into the system. Then you oil the bearings. You check to make sure it spins freely. Then you can plug in your pump to see if it's pumping good. Before I do that, you plug in the motor, see if it's spinning good. I just say that because I didn't want to get water in my ear. It's spinning good. It's pumping good. You want to look at every one of these spider tubings to make sure water is going into all of them. They are. Put all the covers back in. Before you stick in the last one, you take another look-see to make sure all these spider tubes are on the inside of the pads. This one looks like it'll be fine. Stick it in, see the water going through all the pads, and that's how you service a swamp cooler.